Some fights are about money, some are about pride. But what happens when a fight over land, a fight within a family, ends not in a courtroom but on the street with a gun? That's exactly what we're looking at today. This is the tragic story of Sudhansu Khuntia, and it's a chilling reminder of how these disputes can just explode. And this is really the core of it, isn't it? A young guy just heading to his job, and then it's over. His life is just gone. But here's the thing. This wasn't some random act of violence. The person accused of pulling the trigger, it was his own cousin, his own flesh and blood. So that's the big question, right? How does a simple family disagreement, something that happens all the time, escalate into a cold-blooded murder in public? To really get our heads around that, we need to go back and look at exactly what happened, step by step. All right, so let's set the scene. Before we dive into the details of this awful crime, we first need to know a little bit about the man at the center of this whole tragedy. So, Sudhansu Khuntia, he was only 25 years old. He had a good job as a lab attendant at a pretty prestigious medical institute. And on that day, October 13th, it was just another day for him. He hopped on his motorcycle, headed to work. He had absolutely no idea what was coming, no idea at all that he was being followed. And get this wasn't some crime hidden away in the dark. It happened right out in the open, in full public view, on a street he knew well, just a couple of miles from his office. One minute, he's on a completely normal commute, and the next, he's literally running for his life. Okay, so the big question is why? Why would someone do this so publicly, so brutally? Well, according to the police, the answer is something that's torn families apart for generations. It all comes down to a really nasty fight over land. You've probably heard the term ancestral property dispute before. It's basically a fight over land and property that's been in a family for generations. And these things, they don't just pop up overnight. They can simmer under the surface for years, building up all this anger and resentment. And in this particular case, it was a long, bitter feud that put two cousins directly against each other. Yeah, we're not talking about distant relatives here. On one side, you have the victim, Sudhansu Khuntia, and on the other, the man police say pulled the trigger, his own cousin, Siba Pradhan. It's the very definition of a feud that tore a family apart. And you know what makes this even more disturbing? There was already a legal process happening. The whole thing was in civil court. But apparently for Siba Pradhan and his accomplices, that just wasn't good enough. Maybe the wheels of justice were turning too slowly, or maybe they were afraid they were going to lose. Whatever the reason, they decided to take the law into their own hands. So now, let's walk through the actual attack. It's pretty chilling. The police have been able to piece together a timeline of what happened that morning, basically a play-by-play of Sudhansu's last few moments. It all started with a chase. Siba and someone else were right behind Sudhansu on another bike. They shot him twice in the thigh, which made him crash. But even after being shot, Sudhansu gets up and starts running, desperately trying to get to a nearby house for safety. But he couldn't make it. Siba allegedly caught up with him and fired the final, fatal shot into his chest at point-blank range. In the aftermath of this brutal daylight murder, the police, of course, launched an investigation. And pretty quickly, they started to realize this wasn't just one guy who snapped. It looked a lot more like a planned conspiracy. Their investigation started pointing towards 4 specific people. And once they figured out who these 4 were, it became crystal clear just how deep this family plot really ran. I mean, just look at this list of who was arrested. It's staggering. We're talking about Siba's own father, Sukanta, and his brother, Suvendu. They were taken into custody, along with 2 other accomplices. This was no lone act of rage. The evidence was screaming that this was a coordinated family plot to commit murder. The police found the weapon, a country-made pistol, and their investigation pretty much confirmed what the brutal efficiency of the attack already suggested. This was a premeditated murder. The decision to kill Sudhansu wasn't made in the heat of the moment. It was allegedly made days before the trigger was ever pulled. But even with these arrests and all this evidence, this story is far from over, not by a long shot. In fact, there's one huge, glaring problem, a missing piece of the puzzle that leaves the victim's family in a state of constant fear. Siba Pradhan, the man police say carried out the execution, has evaded capture. While his alleged co-conspirators are in custody, he remains on the run. The hunt for the alleged killer is still ongoing.
Just try to imagine being Sudhansu's family. The nightmare just doesn't end. Not only are they grieving the loss of their son, but they're also living in constant fear. They've even reported getting threats, a terrifying reality when the man accused of murdering their son is still out there somewhere.
And that's really the question that this whole terrible story leaves us with. With the alleged killer still at large, the legal process is stalled. For Sudhansu's loved ones, there is no closure, only fear. It's a stark and painful reminder that an arrest is not the same as justice, and for this family, justice delayed is absolutely justice denied.